Welcome everyone to the LEDS-EEP webinar on data collection methods of cities, energy systems and networks, the insights from the InSMART project. This is the sixth webinar of our program on tools and methodologies for municipal and regional sustainable energy planning. In today's webinar, researcher Luís Dias from the Center for Environmental and Sustainability Research at the Nova University of Lisbon in Portugal will present methods and tools for data-driven integrated energy planning coming from the InSMART project. The InSMART project used several methods and tools for collecting data on buildings, transport sector, development of urban spaces, water and sewage system, municipal solid waste management, as well as other sectors. The project implementers performed a thorough analysis of renewable energy potentials in the target cities using the GIS tools. Therefore, Luís will discuss some key data sources for municipal energy planning, data collection methods and challenges, data quality issues, and, following this line, share the main lessons of the InSMART project. Luís Pereira Dias is a researcher at the Climate Change and Sustainable Energy Group from the Center for Environmental and Sustainability Research, CENSE. He has developed throughout his researcher career an extensive experience in the analysis of impacts on the national energy system of new energy technologies in different climate change mitigation policy scenarios, for example, in the Low Carbon Roadmap Portugal 2050 project. He has robust knowledge in energy environments, economy modeling, and has worked on studies and technical support policy decision on atmospheric pollutant emission targets and integrated analysis of climate and air quality policy. Currently, he's a PhD student in the PhD program on global studies at the Nova University of Lisbon in Portugal. Luís, welcome. Thank you very much for being here and for the presentation you're about to make.
Okay, good afternoon, here from Lisbon. Thank you, Tor, for the introduction. As Tor said, I will present the data collection and methods for city energy system and networks characterizations, and more or less I will use the insights of the InSMART project. The InSMART project was a project that lasts 3 years, so I will try to be as simple and concise as possible, because there was a lot of data collection, a lot of methods involved in these projects. I will start to acknowledge all my the partners of the projects, and I will start. So more or less, this is the outline of today's webinar. I will start with the context, a recap of the InSMART project's objectives, following the presentation of past week from the colleagues Rocco and Alexandro. So I will not talk so much about this, and I will talk about city energy planning structure, and then I will start talking about methods and tools that were applied, focusing on specific sectors like building and transport, and also urban spaces and public buildings and services. And I will talk a little bit more in detail on the characterization of the energy supply system within the city, mainly in the assessment of the renewable energy source potential. Just a small context, everyone knows the importance of cities. That's where we live. So it's it comprises more than half of global population are located in urban areas. Is where 80% of the world's GDP is produced, and it is where 2/3 of the primary energy demand is located. So it's a hotspot of energy consumption, and consequently, it represents 70% of total energy-related CO2 emissions. So this just point out in context the huge challenge that cities face today, but also shows the opportunities that cities can offer in terms of climate change mitigation, and also to provide the quality of life of its citizens. The InSMART projects, the InSMART project objective was the establishment and implementation of a comprehensive methodology for enhancing the sustainable planning and focusing more on energy. The vision that is underlined on the InSMART projects was the city sustainable energy future that could be achievable by bringing together cities, scientific and industrial organizations. The project was applied in 4 cities, for Évora in Portugal, here in Portugal, also Nottingham in the United Kingdom, Tricolo in Greece, and also Cesena, Italy. And all these cities had scientific partner that, in some perspective, give the support, the technical support for the cities to achieve these objectives. So the purpose was to design a comprehensive data-driven methods for enhancing city sustainable planning. This was made by also the implementation of the integrated planning tool to identify the optimal mix of short, medium, and long-term measures. And what I will present here is the data collection that was applied to support the integrated planning tool. So I will talk about a little bit about this, because it's very important to the quality of the information that the models use is proportional for the quality of the data that is supplied. This is a framework of the projects that was also presented last week. I just want to point out the key sectors that are presented here: the buildings, energy sector, the transports, and also the other public sectors. What is important here to this presentation is the methods and the data sources used to characterize each of these systems or sectors in what concerns energy consumption, or also the demand of each of these sectors. The first step of the projects was to, in terms of data driven, was the analysis of the existing sustainable policies and also the data availability on each of the city. These allow us to identify the data gaps and the challenges, and also to propose specific measures to overcome these problems on data gaps. This was also the first step to include the different departments of the municipality of each of the cities to contribute to this information gathering. So here I want just to point out the methods and tools used. So we use door-to-door surveys for characterization of building and also mobility patterns. Also another tool was GIS. The GIS for each of the city was also a data provider, so it allows us to show the present situation on what the energy system of the city looks like, and also to include the results of future scenarios for each of the city. Also, another very important tool was the models for the characterization of the building stock. There was an Energy Plus. I will talk a little bit more what was the purpose of this tool, or what it provided, and also what information it needed. And also that it was used some data on smart meters. This was provided from one of the projects partners, the EDP. This is from Portugal, and this was only available for the city. However, I will present the potential that this kind of information that is being applied in a lot of cities can be used, how this information can be used in the proper way, and how can they support some of the city energy system characterization. Also, the transport, I will talk about the transport energy and carbon model, and a little bit on the times model, that is an integrated modeling tool. That was it was the core tool that was used for modeling the city energy system, and was used to analyze the mix of the measures required to meet the sustainable energy targets of the city. This tool allowed to the cities to answer a set of questions that are vital for their energy and even urban planning. Questions like how can the city deliver a more sustainable energy system at the lowest costs? How can the city provide the basis for unlocking the full potential of energy efficiency and large-scale integration of renewable energies in urban areas? And also, how can cities improve their planning policy assessments and the implementation of realistic sustainable energy action plans? This is a powerful tool that can answer a variety of questions, and very complex questions that cities face. So the model is robust. It requires a lot of information, but also the consequences in terms of the solution that it provides is huge. So it was a tool that was used, and I will talk a little bit on it, but next week with my colleagues Rocco and Alexandro, we will present the application of this tool in each of the cities of the project, and you can see the results that was provided in the framework of these projects, and can give the idea of the potential of this tool. And finally, there was used a tool to integrate the opinions of the local stakeholders of each of the cities in order to make a ranking of the different measures that can be applied for future sustainable energy systems at city scale. But I will not talk a little much on this, because it will cover in future presentations. So here I will talk about the residential sector that was modeled in order to have the energy consumption of each of the buildings, households in each of the city. So the first step to model building energy consumption was to collect the data and local knowledge that already exists. So the team start to see the census records, also special database, and the municipality and national records and surveys. This allows to have an overview of what was the available data. And this also shows the gaps of the identification of the gaps in terms of the necessary information for modeling the building energy consumption. Then it was identification of the building typologies. Here the building typologies are defined by the different types of construction periods, and also the type of construction that are the characterization of each of the buildings. Then it was made a detailed housing surveys. For Nottingham, it was like 600 surveys, door to door, and also in Évora 400. The survey was were very exhaustive and had a lot of questions, and the surveys collected a wide range of information for each of the buildings, and not only in terms of technical questions, in terms like the electrical appliance that the households had, or the types of lighting, and also the heating and cooling systems, but also it was asked some socio-economic information in terms of level of income, the employment status, and the age. This was important for what? This was important for the inclusion of the income restrictions of the households in terms of the adoption of specific technologies. For instance, you cannot make future scenarios for the replacement of lighting for all the households without taking into consideration the level of income of the families, because it acts like a constraint. And this was possible with this tool. So we use this information on the level of income of each of the families, and it was introduced in the model to make the realistic scenarios for the city in terms of technology replacement. Okay, and then also it was made some detailed of electricity use analysis using the smart meters data that provide us the possibility to, first of all, make some electricity consumption profiles. That is here. You can see here. Just to point out, all this information is also available in the publication. This allows to see the amounts and when the electricity consumption was made in each of the buildings typologies of the cities, residential focusing. And also it allows some side benefits on identification of potential fuel poverty within certain types of housing. And it was also important to calibrate the energy demand modeling. So the level of confidence that we gain with this in terms of modeling the energy consumption in residential houses was very, very strong. And at last, it was the energy demand of each of the buildings typology was made through the creation of simulation models. Here, the Energy Plus. This was made for the Nottingham University that modeled the building typologies in the specific software. And here is an example where some of the results of the model for the buildings, where you can see the heating and cooling demands and also the electricity demand for each of the building typologies. So this information was introduced in the times model also. This simulation model was also, it allows us also to test some retrofitting options and analyze the effects of some retrofitting options. So the replacement of some specific cooling and heating systems, the addition of insulation walls, roofs of floors, and see the impact of each of these each of these options in terms of energy consumption or energy consumption reduction or increase. For the case of the transport sector was in the first steps was also the same. So first analyze the available data, and then to identify the gaps in terms of information that was necessary to also to model the transport sector in terms of mobility within the city. So for this, it was also made some surveys on the streets where the it was a question about where people are coming from and where they are going to. It was also possible to characterize the type of vehicles and fuel type that was consuming in the age of the vehicles, and also to know the purpose of the mobility. Also for the transport sector, it was also used a model that was applied to each of the city and was made by CISRA, also a partner of the projects, and allow us to have a matrix in terms here. You can see a matrix in terms of origin and destiny. Here are the regions within, in this case, Évora. So this is each of the region here in Évora. This is a map of Évora, and it allows to see the origin and destiny of the citizens of the municipality, and also to analyze where are the hotspots of energy consumption for the transport, and also to make some decisions in terms of application of parking lots or restricted areas for mobility, and to see the impacts of it. So till now, I was focusing on the transport and buildings sectors, but also very important for the city energy system will not be completed without the inclusion of the other very important sectors, like the urban spaces and public buildings, and also other services like water and sewage systems. The urban spaces and the public buildings, although in the overall energy consumption of the city is not significant, is very important to also to characterize in a very robust way these buildings, because are the sectors where the municipality can directly act. So a particular effort was made to model also these buildings and to compress that. And other very important components of the energy system is also the energy supply. The energy supply here is viewed like the potential that the potential of energy production within the city boundaries. For this, the data, in terms of data acquisition, here was municipality teams and also the technical teams contacted local stakeholders to data collection. This created the opportunity to introduce and open the project to local community. For instance, in this process, it was contact private companies that manage, for instance, the water system, and it allows us to make the first contact with them, to show the project, and to invite them in the process of the definition of future measures for sustainable energy plan. And so it was a negotiation on asking for information, but also including them in the process of generation of scenarios for their specific sector. So, like I was saying, this compresses the urban spaces, the water and sewer system, the municipal solid waste chain, and the buildings under municipal management, and also the private service buildings, and also the part on the supply side of the energy system, focusing the renewable energy potential. In terms of urban spaces, yeah, I need to speed up. We would categorize the public lighting. This was very important. So we use some of the information that the municipality has. So here is an example of Nottingham GIS map of all the street lamps of the city. This was also available for Évora and the other cities. The information was also in terms of types of lamps, in terms of energy consumption of the lamps, also the consumption timeline during which of the period of the day was consumed. So here also it was characterized the garden and green areas of the cities. Here this is example of Évora. Here it is show the water and sewage and municipal solid waste system characterization. Here are some examples what was done. So we contact the local stakeholders, the people that are in charge of management of these systems, and ask for information in terms of energy consumption, or for instance in water, the amount of water that was supplied to the city. This allowed to characterize also the energy consumption of these systems. And the information was also in terms of spatial definition. We can see here the location of all the water treatment plants and the pump stations, and also here the amount of energy consumption of sewage systems for Trikala in Greece. So in each of the zones of the city where the sewage systems consume more energy. Here is an example of the buildings managed by the municipality. So again, we obtain information for specific buildings, for instance here schools, and also the consumption by type of energy consumption. For instance, for the schools, not only electricity but also other forms of energy like LPG or natural gas. The private buildings were also targeted and characterized in terms of location and also energy consumption. This was made through the inclusion of the municipality technical teams that provided some of the information. Now, a very important component that I like to spend some time is the assessment of the renewable energy source potential within the city. So in the objective of the project, we aim to characterize the supply side and the potential that the city, that the energy sources that are within the city boundaries. We try to cover all the renewable energy sources that can be possible to extract within the city boundaries. So we go through geothermal, winds, biogas, biomass, and also solar technology. It was a specific topic that was solar technologies that were focusing a particular dedication on this. So in terms of solar technologies, the potential was analyzed for different technologies, from solar thermal and also solar PV, in terms of rooftop and also in plant size and also in facades, and different PV technologies. All this was made through robust approaches, mainly for instance, for the plant size. The PV utility scale, here is a map of Évora, where there is a location of the possible location of PV utility scales systems, considering restriction of the land use. More information are available on the working package deliverables on the InSMART websites. I just want to show some of the results. Here are some technical potential for PV for each of the cities, and also by building typology and by cities region. Okay. I don't know if I have more time, but I will pass to the conclusions. In overall, there are a lot of challenges on harmonization of data at different scales. For example, the public lighting. So we get some information on point by point data on terms of public lighting. So we know in each of the streets what are the types of lamps, but then we only needed information for the model at the region level. So it was difficult to make some harmonization on these scales. All cities that were a part of the project faced some difficulties on privacy issues on data from the companies, and also the response time. It's difficult to engage some of the stakeholders, and even some of the stakeholders said no, and it was difficult to get some information. For instance, for municipal solid waste for particular cities, we overcome this problem by using some national information that was applied at local level. The data collection allowed the interaction and engagement with the key city stakeholders, as I mentioned, and also the opportunity for dissemination of the project. Also, they engaged different city management departments in the early stages of the project. This was very important to the cities and to the cities teams, technical teams, because allowed them to talk with other departments for and engage in co-creation some of the measures. So it is also, is this a recommendation? Is it important when deciding the type of model that the city wants to apply to validate in terms of work and time that is necessary for the modeling, and also to try to point out the questions that want to be answered. And finally, is it highly important to make assessment of the endogenous renewable energy sources within the city boundaries. Some additional information are available on the InSMART projects, for instance, the project book and all the working package deliverables. And thank you.
Thanks to you, Luis. Thank you very much for this presentation. As usual, please, if you have any question, write it in the chat box that it's in the right panel. And I had actually one that I am processing now. So please, you can read them and answer them as they come.
Okay, you ask how the citizens were included in the process of the generation of the scenarios, and okay, and how was performed. So in the objectives of in the proposed methodology of the project, it was included some workshops that allowed. We invite different stakeholders of the city to a workshop, and we included some of the citizens' representatives. So, like the parish responsibles, or the parishes of the cities, in terms of the person that represents each of the parish of the city. This allowed, and the objectives of the workshops were to, it was several workshops, and one of the first workshop, it was to present the project and ideas and what were we doing, and the next workshop was to present also some of the results, and then we present some of the scenarios that we were thinking about on preparing, and the stakeholders validate these scenarios, or we leave some room from them to propose some scenarios, taking in consideration the possibilities of the tool. And also in the end, it was also available the possibilities of the stakeholders to validate the scenarios, and also in terms of criteria. This will be talked a little bit, will be presented in the next week webinars where we going to present some of the results that will answer your question, because in this process, it was the stakeholders were somehow give some importance to specific criteria. For instance, if they prefer that the scenario, the measure, reduce the energy consumption or improve their quality of life. So they give some criteria, some weights to this, just to ranking. And the other question, how reliable is to assess the national data when dealing with the data privacy from stakeholders who denied who denied to give it. Yeah, in my perspective, my recommendation is that in advance you, like I said, the first step was to analyze the data availability. In this process, we try to contact directly the specific stakeholders for specific sectors, for instance, for water systems, and the national data allowed the national data that was available allow us to overcome this problem with data privacy. So, because when you are talking about very detailed at city scale, the companies are somehow not comfortable to provide this information. But when we are talking about a national level, you can it is easier to overcome this issue. They don't feel so. You cannot target and say that the level of consumption of this particular water treatment is X. So if you use in terms of national, there is no problem. What is the reality follow-up of the cities are after being given the results? Yeah, the follow-up, one of the core objective of this project was also to provide realistic pathways and realistic scenarios and measures for the city sustainable energy action plans. So the cities used the information from this project to introduce in their sustainable energy action plan. For instance, in Evra, they use the scenarios results for public lighting to introduce in the sustainable energy action plan, and then they are also using this information to try to get some funding on the replacement of lamps for LED. So they use a lot of this information. In terms of renewable energy sources, that's different, because it allows just to point out the potential within the city, and now the follow-up is to implement, and this is difficult because of funding constraint. But they can use this information to point out if this level of renewable energy sources is implemented, the energy reduction or the emissions are reduced on this amount, and somehow to have the capacity to show the impacts. I don't know if I answered your question.
I don't know if we have other questions. Yes, we have a new one.
Okay, nice question. Yeah, in fact, I was presenting here I was just showing some potential on solar PV. Yes, in fact, I didn't show here because I didn't have the time, but you can see the information on the deliverable that was made for this purpose on term of estimation the renewable energy source potential. So it was also analyzed in terms of resource availability. For example, for solar PV, it was in terms of, for instance, in solar PV quantity of electricity that can be produced by this potential, I cross it with the available solar resource in each of the city. And of course, different cities has different potential, and the level of introduction of this technology is different. So the very good example is Évora, that is located in Portugal, has a higher level of irradiance, has a huge potential for PV, and so the PV shows as also cost effective. And also when you are talking of Nottingham, although the potential is lower, it can also be used. But so I just want to point out that the different conditions of the city was included. In terms of the resource that was assessed. For instance, in terms of wind energy, we analyzed in terms of resource before starting the assessment of the technical potential. So we analyze in terms of intensity and frequency of winds, in terms of speeds at each of the city locations. And it was possible to analyze this and see that wind energy was not a reliable energy source to be applied to these cities. I don't know if I was clear.
Yes, I don't know if we have any other questions. Let's give a minute. Because next week, what will be presented are the three cases and how they were implemented. The case of Cesena in Italy, of Nottingham in UK, and the case of Évora. I think there were a couple. The other city was Trikala in Greece, right, Luis?
Sorry, I didn't hear you correctly.
Next week, it will be presented the cases themselves and how they were case by case brought forward regarding all the process for the InSMART. It will only be missing Trikala in Greece, if I am not mistaken.
Yeah, you are correct.
Yes. Yes, Rocco is also stating it. But, well, I think that's it for the questions. So we should perhaps start closing the session. Luis, once again, thank you very much for the presentation. As it was mentioned, this has been recorded and will be available in our website by tomorrow. You are all invited, and we will keep on sending reminders for next week's presentation of the case studies of Cesena, Évora, and Nottingham. And please, if you have a couple of minutes to fill in the survey that I have just copied in the chat window, will be very appreciated. Luis, once again, thank you very much for your time, and see you next week.
See you next week, sir. Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.